So we're going to be looking at a scenario where the Empire of Japan at their peak comes to the modern world. Now the Empire of Japan, it was the Japanese Empire during World War II, in which they expanded into all of these lands, except I don't remember if Thailand was forced to join them or like an ally. They could have been, and might have just been my bad on this map. But this giant empire includes much of the important areas of China, almost all of Indonesia and Papua New Guinea, as well as pretty much all of the Southeastern Asian countries. If you guys do enjoy this video, make sure to like and subscribe, as we are on the road to 3,000 subscribers at the moment. But anyways, let's go ahead and get into this scenario. So the Japanese Empire comes back right now, and I'm going to say they're the second strongest country in the world behind the United States. Because of all these Chinese areas they got, China is fairly weak now. But the first thing they're going to be doing is cleaning up the Papua area down over here, as there's not really anything that these countries can do. Indonesia is just reduced down to their Papua New Guinea area as they are wiped out, and Papua New Guinea is just absolutely destroyed. Inside of a peace treaty, we see the full annexation of Indonesia and Papua New Guinea. And it is right here where we see Australia form the Pacific Pact. Pretty much any Pacific nation that is not inside of the alliance right here can join up in the Australian alliance, in which we see New Zealand join, as well as the rest of these island nations inside of the Pacific. And the Japanese Empire is kind of forced not to move down south anymore into Australia in this area. But that's okay. Moving up north, we see the Japanese declaring war on Mongolia. Their troops start a movement into the Mongolian area inside of the east. They reach major successes in this area, and they make their way to the center of the country. They move up and eventually capture Ulaanbaatar, if that's the right name of the capital. Mongolia is pretty much screwed, as we see them capitulate over to the Japanese Empire. Inside of a treaty, we see Mongolia always loses to the Japanese. But we see the eastern parts of Mongolia going over to the Empire of Japan. And then they go ahead and make the rest of Mongolia into their ally, pretty much changing the government of Mongolia. And the reason they do that is because of this. The Empire of Japan declares war on the Communist Republic of China, or the People's Republic or something like that. And with their troops being up in this area, we see the Japanese moving in from the north, as well as using their ally in Mongolia to invade into China. Down over in the coast, we see Japan connecting up all of their little exclaves right here, as well as starting a spearhead to go and cut off this part of China from this area. China will manage to push into the northern part of Burma, but everywhere else, really, they don't really have much success. They lose all of their coastline, and eventually India joins the war. Now, realistically, if India joined, Pakistan would join, and then we'd have a whole thing. But just for simplicity, we're going to leave Pakistan out of this. And another thing is mountains. But you see, in mountains, we do not care. At least right now, we're going to pretend that the Himalayas do not exist. We're going to pretend this is flat, open land where a bunch of corn can grow, in which India has much success invading into a very weakened China, capturing all of this land before digging in for defensive positions. China is pushed out of Burma, and a full-on assault invasion happens. The southern areas are cut off from the northern areas, and with a majority of Japanese troops focusing down in the south, it is wiped out very quickly. And with the troops now moving up this way, we see a full-on movement up north. And eventually we see the surrender of China over to the Empire of Japan. And now we need to look at a peace treaty. Inside of this peace treaty, Japan is going to be annexing these areas of China. Mongolia will be annexing these areas. India will be expanding their border right here, as well as in this very contested area over here. Taking all of the Chinese Kashmir areas that they wanted. I think there could be other areas, but I'm not really super familiar with the Kashmir area. In the areas India invaded, they founded Tibet, in which this area, Tibet, is going to be uniting with Nepal. We see Xinjiang being released, and the rest of these three right here are all going to be turned into Japanese, alliance members. And Japan is definitely the strongest country in the world by now in economy, military, navy, air force, all of that. Because of this, the United States is going to end up joining the Pacific Alliance. And also, a strange pickup, we see Ecuador joining. But Japan is kind of cornered at the moment. I mean, they could go after the Russians, but the Russians are probably the third or fourth strongest country in the world. They could go after India, but they just fought a war together, and their relations are fairly good right now. So, they choose Bangladesh. As they start the invasion, they pee inside of the Indian Ocean, but they begin a movement into this little panhandle. Once they get about here, they are stopped, and guerrilla warfare ensues, in which a lot of, like, tsunamis or whatever, like, doesn't, like, Bangladesh, some of it, like, sink every day or something like that? I don't know. I'm not really familiar with Bangladesh. But the Japanese are going to do bombing runs throughout Bangladesh, eventually capturing the northern part of Bangladesh, then eventually focusing in on the coastal areas, in which tons of Japanese men are lost in this little ensue to take over the rest of the country, and then Bangladesh is fully annexed. After this, we see India making an alliance, and they're not going to go out and say it's to stop Japanese expansion, but really it is. We end up seeing Tibet joining it, but now it is time for Japan's big invasion, in which they declare war on Russia. They put tons of troops and money into this invasion, which they start the invasion into Sakhalin. And with this invasion being a complete surprise, we see a full they take all of Sakhalin, and they make a landing inside of Siberia. But the main front line is this whole area right here, as we see multiple invasions throughout this whole thing. We also see Mongolia start to do some work. The Mongolians reach up and connect up with this random lake, focusing a lot of their troops on Manchuria. They make many landings over here, and eventually sweep the Russians up all the way out of Manchuria. But now the Russians start to arrive, and it is heavy pushbacks against the Japanese. We even see the Russians start to invade into Japan. But over inside of Europe, we may see Ukraine getting involved inside of this war. And they invade up into these northern areas a little bit, as well as cross over and disrupt Russia's land, like oil fields. Georgia also joins. But these guys are pretty much just distracting against Russia. They're not really going to do much. And that's pretty obvious very quickly. Georgia is destroyed. And Ukraine, they lose a lot of land very quickly. They're pushed out of the northern area of Russia. And now a full-on Russian assault happens in Ukraine. They take Kiev, and Ukraine surrenders. That distraction does allow Japan to push the Russians out of their land and even push into Russian land more, as well as advance their front over inside of the Siberian area. The Mongols on horseback shooting machine guns are going to absolutely destroy Russian tanks, because Russian tanks, they fall apart after one bullet hits them. And maybe even a few horses kick the tanks and they break apart. But it is not looking good for the Russians over inside of Asia. And that could be because Russia may be a little overrated. As we see a big push up, and eventually we see the Siberia gets cut off from Russia. And we see a massive sweep through this area. Eventually all capitulates over to the Empire of Japan. Eventually Finland joins the war. And yet another front line is established inside of Europe. And with Petersburg about to fall, and now with Poland getting involved, yes, I know in real life this would be very hard to invade, but I don't care. We see the Russians surrendering. Inside of a peace treaty, we see the Japanese Empire annexing these regions from the Russian Republic. They also annex this from Siberia. They turn Siberia into a puppet state. Mongolia gets all of this land, which now Mongolia is pretty dang big. Poland annexes Kaliningrad, and Finland annexes all of these lands from Russia. They wanted Petersburg, but of course Russia will not give up that. But because of this invasion, the Pacific Alliance is done. And the Pacific Alliance makes a landing inside of the Papua island of Japan, and a full-on invasion begins. Japan had no idea that this was even happening, so they very quickly lose access to all of the Papua island. They lose their Pacific islands over here, and many of their Indonesian islands begin to fall over to Australian and American control. A landing is made inside of the southern part of the Philippines, but this is when real Japanese fighting starts, and they are pushed right out. Like I said, they're pushed right out. It's right here where Canada joins the Pacific Alliance, as well as Colombia, Panama, Chile, and Honduras. So with all these extra troops, we see more invasions of these Indonesian islands. Eventually, they make a landing inside of Borneo, and remaking a landing inside of the southern island of the Philippines, taking it all. Japanese reinforcements soon arrive down here, and they manage to kick out the Americans and Australians almost completely out of Indonesia. They retake the Philippines, and they even make a really risky landing made over inside of They make a landing inside of Australia. They then take Hawaii, and I know this would be pretty hard to take, but we're going to ignore that. But it is right here where we see the Indians also starting an invasion of the Empire of Japan. They move down through this Southeast Asian area, reaching much success over here, but stationed troops that were over here in case the Americans landed inside the mainland. They're going to get pushed back quite easily, except they're going to hold on to Bangladesh. Tibet starts an invasion into Xinjiang, but over inside of the central areas of the Chinese countries, they will face invasions. Eventually, Russia joins the side of the Pacific Pact or whatever, as they want their land back. So they send the troops right in, also starting an invasion into Siberia. And it goes really well, as there weren't really any troops stationed up over here. The Japanese didn't really think of a Russian attack. So Mongolia really is pushed pretty much all the way out of their recently annexed lands. Then Kazakhstan joins, as well as Belarus and Armenia. And with this full-on invasion, it's not really going good for the Chinese allies. All of Siberia falls, and Japan just doesn't really have the military to fight two wars at once. They're kicked out of Australia, and eventually with some hard fighting, they lose America, or Hawaii. The emperor makes a decision to completely evacuate Indonesia, as well as the Philippines, and they start moving up the Southeast Asian panhandle. India starts to push back in, and they're kicked out of Tibet. With a full-on invasion and a solidified front line being established over here, the Japanese are not doing so well. Xinjiang surrenders, as well as pretty much all of the Chinese puppets, and Mongolia. And now it's just Japan fighting some pretty strong countries. It is not going well for Japan at all. They lose access to China, and with a naval landing being made, Taiwan is taken. We see all of their Chinese areas except for Manchuria falling over, and now we see Korea getting cut off. The Manchurian area surrenders. Russia takes back their island, as well as invades into Siberia. From this, the people rise up inside of Japan and they overthrow the government. And the Japanese Empire has been dethroned. Let's look at a peace treaty. In a peace treaty, we see these areas going back over to Russia. Korea is granted independence. We see kind of like a new Mongolian state, but it's more south. Xinjiang loses land to India, but they do get granted more land up north, which is kind of what they wanted. Yeah? Okay.
No, the other track. Dude, hit me. Well, now don't fight it, because if you die, we die. One. Oh! There's other third parties. You just die. Oh my god.
Which China has been heavily reduced. Burma and Bangladesh are granted independence, as well as a united Vietnamese state and Thailand. The Philippines is granted independence, as well as Taiwan. Then the rest of this is just going to be released underneath the Republic of Oceania, and it's probably going to break out into civil war tomorrow. But that is going to do it for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.